Christine Harding with the Cyber Center for Education and Innovation, a program of the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation. Today, our Cybersecurity Chat is a panel discussion with 4 members of the Queen of Codes, stories from the National Security Agency's Computing Women. We're going to start with Eileen Buckholtz, Director of the Queen of Codes, and also she will serve as the monitor. Eileen is a master computer scientist, a multi-published Maryland writer, and a former professor of IT, teaching online for 17 years. So Eileen, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate the Cybersecurity Center for Education and Innovation to have us here today and to be part of this in the Nepris platform. And we welcome everyone to join our talk, all the people that were with us for the first talk, and any new people that have come in, and all the people who will be watching this in the months and years to come. We are delighted to be here today to talk about our Queens of Code project, telling the story of our computing women who worked at the National Security Agency in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And if you, from last time, you remember, we've kept the fact that we were computer experts and we were working there for over 50 years. It's been a secret. My sincere appreciation to all the women who have participated in this project in running their own stories as well as providing support. Our women have had a front row seat and a lot of hands-on experience to the march of technology. And boy, have things changed over the last 50 or 60 years. We worked on hardware and software that led the way to many of the techie things that we enjoy today, like networking, the internet, word processing, search technology, voice recognition, faster chip tech, and more. We were pioneers in computing and in technology, and we served our country. We live in a time when the future is uncertain, especially now, and it's hard to predict what is next. However, those who can predict the future the best are the ones who help create the future. And that's what you can do with a career in technology. You create the future. This is our little logo, and we were information and computer experts in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is a picture of some of the women who have contributed, and there's a lot of pictures from now, from then, as well as a few from now. Today, we're going to have several people on our panel. One of our people is we're hoping we'll get in, is Dr. Nancy Welker, who is an award-winning physicist. She was NSA's first director of R&D, and she also helped bring in the first microelectronics lab for the agency. Kathy Jackson was a software developer, a systems architect, and program manager, and had a 40-year career. Monna Nabers was a programmer. Then she started her own IT and video business and is now a health IT expert. And one thing you'll hear through the talks and the slides that these women have in common, that they have embraced change and as well as technology, and were willing to try something new, even beyond their comfort zone. And we think that you should too. You should try something new in the areas of technology. Let's talk to you a little bit about what it was like to grow up in the 50s and 60s when the technology landscape was way different than it is today. We're going to do some time traveling today. We're going to go back to the 50s and early 60s. So put on your dyed shirt like the one I have, your bell-bottom pants, and hum a Beatles tune, and you will be in the right mood. So growing up in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't easy for smart girls. Girls were supposed to always let the boys win, whether it was a game of tennis or chess, and don't let your intelligence show was kind of the mantra. After World War II, women were encouraged to go into traditional fields like teaching, nursing, or being a librarian, secretary, beautician, or homemaker. In a study that was done in 1957, the Girl Scouts found that only 16% of women were even thinking about college or a career. But our queens were different. They were part of that 16%, and most of them went to college and working at NSA right after they came out. And we had a few that came out and worked for the agency right out of high school. Some wanted to major in math or physics. If you were lucky, your parents encouraged you. And if not, you probably went into another field. And that's some of our queens had that experience where they were so discouraged, they went in another field, but then found their way into computers at the agency. We didn't have computers back then. We didn't even have pocket calculators because they weren't invented until 1975. Color TV came in the mid 60s, so everything was black and white. We played with maybe some of the games you're still familiar with, like Play-Doh and Magic 8 Ball and the Frisbees. The music was Elvis in the 50s and Beatles in the 60s. And we did things like dance class and charm school in the South and Girl Scouts 4-H. A lot of the books kind of enforced the traditional careers. There were like Sherry Ames, Student Nurse, and those kinds of books. And Nancy Drew also had some adventures, maybe not as exciting as the Hardy Boys, but she did have some adventures. So we didn't have pocket calculators, but we used a slide rule for calculations, and that was a device that was invented in 1620. So that was kind of hard to use, but that's what we had. And the closest thing I came to a computer in high school was using knitting needles to sort things called needle cards. And I did this for the school office. It really wasn't a computer, but there was the cards, and we used the knitting needles to put them in alphabetical order. I went to Ohio State, and I became one of the first graduates from their computer science department. And I have one story to tell you about a crystallizing moment in my life when I was growing up, and I hope that you have some crystallizing moments in your life too. This was one where a crystallizing moment is when something really catches your interest and you know that you want to pursue it in your life. And in 1965, in Warner Robins, we had two really good girl basketball teams. We always had the number 1 and 2 in the state. So I made up my mind that I wanted to go out, try out for the basketball team. Well, I wasn't very good at jumping. I wasn't very good at shooting, and I wasn't so good at running, but I had a lot of high hopes. And I went to tryouts, and I ran my heart out, and we glistened instead of sweated. But I tried out, and at the end of the tryouts, the coach came to me and said, "Eileen, you're really not good enough to make the team." He was very gentle. And then he said, and so I was really disappointed, but he said, "But I have another offer for you. And I've talked to your geometry and your trigonometry teacher, and he said that you are the best math person in the school, and we want to offer you the job of being the official scorekeeper." So I thought about it, and I accepted, and I got to have the best seat in the basketball team at all the games, and I got to go on all the home and away games. So after that, I was thinking, well, maybe if I couldn't be an athlete, maybe I could be an athlete. And that kind of gave me a kind of focus that I was going to be going into something math or science related. That was a change for me. So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Nancy, I actually gave an introduction to you.
Hello, thank you for being here this afternoon. I understand we're going to talk a little bit about how we got into the STEM business ourselves and give you a little of our background. When I thought about it for me, I thought I really hit the trifecta on the things that kind of push you in the direction of STEM. First of all, I'm an only child, and we all know that parents tend to put their hopes and dreams on the shoulders of their children. Well, if there's only one, it gets kind of intensive sometimes. And if it's all a girl, well, they would normally have and concentrated the STEM kinds of things on the boys in the family, but since there weren't any, they were stuck with me, and they were quite happy with that, I think. And I didn't need all that much encouraging because it was just kind of a natural inclination to me. I also had a built-in mentor in my childhood. We lived with my grandfather. He was a physician in a small town in Pennsylvania. He loved his profession and his art. He talked about it all the time, and so I was encouraged almost on a daily basis. He wanted me to go into medicine, of course, but somewhere along the line, I did pivot to physics rather than medicine. The third one is I went to a women's college. Now, there aren't too many of those around anymore. I have a great deal of respect for them. Women's colleges have two main goals in their lives. One is to give you the very best education they possibly can, and the other is to make sure you understand that you can do anything you want to and set your mind to and work hard at. I think that's the part that's most important, really, because anybody can teach you the material, but they can't always instill in you that notion. So when it came time for me to graduate, my senior year, I went to the recruiting office for job recruiters and started to look at the literature, found out an interesting thing, and that was that all the people that I might have thought of I might want to work for as a physicist were there, but their brochures all said the same thing, basically. They said jobs at, say, fill in the blank, IBM, Bell Labs, for women. And I thought, well, I don't really want a job for women. I want a job for somebody who just got a degree in physics. And so I thought, this is not good. But I looked around a little more, found that there were some government recruiters there, found this place called NSA, which at the time I thought was the National Student Association, but I learned better, read the brochure, and talked to the recruiter from NSA. He was very encouraging. I said, well, I'm probably going to go to graduate school first, but I'm interested in coming there later. And he said, oh, no, you come now, and we'll send you to graduate school. And I did come, and they did send me through a master's and a PhD, so I was extremely happy about that. NSA has always been a great place for educational benefits, and they were certainly true to form in this particular case. So I got there, started working in experimental physics, physics research, which is just exactly what I wanted to do. The piece of apparatus that you see in front of you was my PhD thesis experiment in superconductivity. As I say, it was just what I wanted to do. Lab rat was the way I described myself most of the time. And I was able to present the results of that at the 14th International Low Temperature Physics Conference in Helsinki, Finland, in 1975, I have to admit. So it's been a while. Don't ask too many deep probing questions, but I think I can answer most of them. So I did that for about 20 years, actually. And there was frosting on the cake, really, because the next picture shows me in a field experiment, which I never even thought about or dreamed that I would be able to do, doing atmospheric noise measurements. In order to find atmospheric noise, you have to get rid of all the man-made noise. So I went to some of the most remote places you can ever imagine. The particular place in this slide is in Northwest Canada. It rains, I believe the number was 323 days a year on average, and cold. And I loved every minute of it, because it was just an exciting adventure, and I was able to do other similar things in other similar garden spots of the world. So that was great. After about 20 years, though, they said, well, now you need to do some managing. So we want you to set up a microelectronics research lab. They were building a fabrication facility, a chip factory is the term that's often used, over at Fort Meade. And so they just said, go do it, no further information. And so with a small but very good team, we were able to do that, build a fine facility, basically a plot of grass in Columbia, and ended up with a really fine facility. The picture you see is the day we cut the ribbon, and I had a handful of senior executives from NSA there, and I was about to give them the tour. I'm the short one on the left. All the rest, of course, were men, so they're the tall ones in the picture. But I don't care what kind of executives they were, we still had forced them to get on the bunny suit, the shoe covers, the head covers, the mask, the whole works, because people, no matter how clean they think they are very dirty compared to a lab like this. And we operated that very successfully for about 12 years. But shortly after it opened, I was called upon to move back to Fort Meade and take over the whole microelectronics operation. So that meant the factory and the research lab. And the next picture that you see is a 6-inch wafer. This is the kind of product that we were able to produce. We really had a mini Intel, if you want to look at it that way. We did everything. We did everything from design to mask making to fabrication, testing, assembly or packaging, QC, the whole works. So it was like running a small business. And it was a long way from what I set out to do, a long way from my lab rat days, but it was great fun and very challenging in a lot of different ways. You had to worry about budgets and safety. Safety is number one in a facility like that because there are dangerous chemicals and so on. So I was able to really enjoy that part of my career as well. And before I could enjoy it too long, though, they always have another idea for you. My next move was to become deputy and then chief of the research and technology all of the research and technology at NSA, which was really a different experience because there was no way I would be an expert in everything that was going on, but I could certainly bask in reflected glory of the people, very bright people who worked in NSA research, and I enjoyed that tremendously as well. I just wanted to urge you to think about a career in STEM. Math and physics are very exciting. Any branch of it will do. I had a career that I could never have dreamed about when I was back up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania and starting out as a lab rat, as I just said earlier, to go all the way up to a senior executive position at NSA running the research and technology organization. But it was great, and I enjoyed every minute of it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was great. And our next speaker is Kathy Jackson. Hi, Kathy. Go ahead. Tell them about your great career.
Thank you for providing me the opportunity to come and talk to you about some of my experiences while working in the IT field. First, I'd like to give you a little background information about myself and how I came to arriving to work at NSA. But I was born in Connecticut and raised in New England. Then my family moved to Louisiana when I was a senior in high school. And so I attended Louisiana State University. Now, I always enjoyed when I was in school, kind of math and math-related subjects. So naturally, I was interested in my college program in majoring in statistics, and I wanted to be a statistician at the Census Bureau. But at the end of my college program, I went through the job interview process that LSU sponsored, and I became aware of the National Security Agency and a special program that they had, which was a 3-year training program that would provide me training in the area of to be a computer systems analyst. Now, it sounded very interesting. It was math-based, so I decided to go ahead and take that position, even though I don't think I really understood at the time what a computer systems analyst did. I moved to Maryland and I started my training at NSA, and my initial training included learning the Fortran programming language, and then I was ready to take my first assignment as a newly minted computer systems intern. So I reported to my first office and investigated what kind of support that they needed, and that's when I became introduced to the world of computers at NSA, and also the basement at NSA, where they kept all the computer systems. It was a huge cavernous area, and the system I was going to work on was a UNIVAC 1108 system. I just want to show you an example of what a system like that looked like in the 1960s. As you can see, it was huge. It filled up a whole room, and it had a processor, and it had tape drives, and it had a card reader and a computer operator console, and then it had printers, which you can see on the right-hand side. And my job was to take my Fortran programs down to this computer room and have the computer operators run through my program using the data they had on the tape drives. And then my job was to take the output listings off the printer. And I reviewed this data, and it was mostly zeros and ones, but my job was to search for what we called anomalies in the data, and that was unusual data patterns. So what I would do is fix the problem with the unusual data patterns and go back and resubmit the program again. Now, in those days, we were lucky to get maybe 2 runs a day, but I did find it very interesting. I found NSA very interesting because it was such an unusual place and such an unusual environment. But after several months of doing this work, I was ready to move on to my next intern assignment. It actually wasn't until years later I read a historical review of the data that was processed on those UNIVAC systems in the early 1960s and how important that data was to national security. So it made me feel good that I could, not only enjoy the work, but I was able to make a contribution to the nation's security, which actually was probably, one of the most significant contributions I made during my career. But anyway, At this time, and this was around 1970, many new systems were being introduced, including the IBM systems, the 360 and 370 systems, which were very popular at the time. The computer programming language I used on that computer was Assembly Language Coding, or ALC. Now, programmers really loved or hated assembly language coding. And the reason was that, for myself anyway, I liked it because it was more efficient to use. The source code that we were actually writing in was more closely aligned with the object code that the computer actually read in. So it made it easier to get the work done. But it had a problem with documentation, and also it was a little bit harder to learn. So, like I said, people liked using it or didn't like using it, but I did like using it. But at the same time, during the 70s, a lot of new programming languages were introduced. And some of these languages were good for scientific applications, and some were better for business applications. So I did write programs using these IBM machines, and I used the programming languages of PL1 and COBOL. So this is just a little bit of an example of the kind of work that a computer programmer just starting out in the IT world would be involved in. What I found was that IT, because of the rapid changing and innovation within this field of IT, it provided interesting work, and it provided a variety of career opportunities that were really challenging and interesting. So all the way from the time that we were writing programs for these huge systems in the 1960s to today, when programmers are writing software for desktop computers and supporting them, the world is continually changing and the opportunities continue to be there. Now, I would recommend to a middle school or high school student who is interested in pursuing a career in IT to complete these steps throughout your high school and college career. First, I'd say complete math through high school algebra and calculus, if calculus is available within your school program. Also, I think it's good to complete a high school college prep curriculum. Even though not all jobs in IT actually require a college degree, the college prep curriculum provides the diversity that would allow a person to get a better sense of how they would want to use IT in their future career. Also, I think it's great to attend local activities, particularly STEM activities, and going to classes and joining clubs and attending presentations that focus on the skills in this skill area. Now, I guess I would say that I don't think this area of concentration has changed all that much from the 1960s to today. I think it's still rapidly changing, and I think in many areas the research has just begun. And that's particularly significant, I think, in the area of cybersecurity. There's still a lot of research to be done. There's a lot of development to be done. And there's a lot to look forward to in increasing the ability for IT to manage security in this area. In fact, if I were going to start over, I think I would focus on a career that was focused on cybersecurity. Anyway, I do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell you about some of my experiences while working at NSA. I spent over 40 years there. I had 2 overseas tours in England, and they were very enjoyable as well. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate that. Next, we have Monna.
If you look at this first slide, you can tell my biography is a little bit different. My career path took some unusual twists and turns, and I want to tell you a little bit about how I got into the computer field and then what happened as I went through life, and encourage you to not worry as much as I did. So I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin, and I mean, we had like 10 or 11 people in my grade school, and it wasn't until high school that I was actually introduced to what I consider a science. I was always a good reader, loved to read and learn, loved to learn about nature and things like that when I was growing up.
In high school, I loved math, went all the way through calculus, and I found out I enjoyed chemistry, and I took 2 years of chemistry at advanced chemistry. So when I went to college and I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, since I'd enjoyed chemistry in high school, I said, okay, well, why don't I major in chemistry? Because I really wasn't sure, exactly what I was going to go into, but I liked chemistry. But after 2 years of chemistry and then also being introduced to so many different classes that I'd never heard about, I decided chemistry wasn't for me, and I really enjoyed the classes, my zoology classes, more. So I ended up picking ecology, fish and marine water, marine biology, things like that, and ended up with a zoology degree when I graduated. Then I really didn't know what I was going to do after I graduated. I knew I probably would need to go to graduate school to do anything in my field of zoology. And somewhere in early spring, one of my friends from Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, where I'd gone to high school, was already out here in Maryland working for NSA. And she says, well, you might want to look into NSA. They've got this new intern program, and you can, apply for it. And because there's this security clearance, it takes a while. So you wouldn't have to start work right away, which was the one goal I did have. I wanted to travel in Europe after I graduated from college. So I interviewed with NSA and I got the job. And that's exactly what I did. I traveled through Europe for about 3.5 months and came out to Maryland in September and started work at NSA in their intern program. And while I was when I came into NSA, they put you through a training program for about 6 weeks, and you learn about all the things that happen at NSA. They give you lots of tests and see what you might be good at. And believe it or not, they said, oh, you might be good in the computer systems programming internship. I said, oh, computers. I have no idea what those are. I sort of remember they had for starting computers at Wisconsin when I left, but I'd never even seen one. But that's what I ended up doing and found out I was actually very good at it because apparently I have a very logical sense of doing things as well as common sense. So I turned out to be a very good programmer, and in each of the offices I was in through the internship program, because we transferred from one office to another, so you would learn different things. I learned Fortran programming. I learned to be a COBOL programmer, and then I also learned assembly language. And I was even introduced to systems design in some areas. And one of the fun things that I did do, and this will be the only piece I'll tell you about that I was really impressed with myself at NSA, is we did have field sites overseas. And in our era, in the late 60s and early 70s, we didn't have the internet. So do you know how you talk to people on the other side of the world? It was pretty awful. And if you were on a phone line, you could barely hear anything. So they said, let's write a program, see if we can talk computer to computer. Well, the way we did that was through teletypes. And now you're going to say, what's a teletype? Well, it looks like a typewriter. But anyway, I wrote one of the first programs that sent information from teletype to teletype so we could communicate with the operators, computer operators at our bases overseas. I even met my husband at NSA, and after working there, we were there, he was there longer than I was, but at one point we got to thinking about, actually what we got to thinking about was I was getting ready to deliver my first child, and I had to leave. And one of the things that was hard at that point was there was very little programs or very few childcare facilities for infants. Plus, I didn't have any relatives in the area. So I left NSA for several years and stayed at home taking care of my daughter until she was old enough to go to preschool. While I was at home, I did work on an advanced degree and got my MBA from the University of Baltimore. I then went back to NSA, and we did a lot of flexible time. So we get my daughter to and from preschool and then school, and both of us still work. And this time I was more of a liaison between people who wanted to do a program, create a program, and were working with outside contractors, and did that for several years and really learned an awful lot. And then again, at some point, my husband and I made some decisions to take another career path. We wanted to open our own business. So we both left NSA, and we opened computer video stores. And we had 3 or 4 stores over the next probably 10, 12 years that we ran. That brings me to midlife. So you can see my career paths are changing. They're not always the same. At midlife, there was some major changes, and I decided that I actually wanted to do something completely different and get out of the business. So again, another friend said, have you ever thought about this new field called health information? It used to be called medical records, but you might look into it because you always loved science and you loved learning things about medicine and all those kinds of things. And so I looked into it and I said, hey, this looks like I would enjoy it. So I went back and got another degree in health information. And in the next 20 years, I worked in health information at different health facilities throughout Maryland and Vermont. I was started out as a operations manager in the department, then became director and even corporate direct facility. I loved every minute of it. And it was completely different. And yet it was my background in computers at NSA that made the transition into this new field so good and made me a valuable asset at that point in time. I went into the field just at the time they had electronic medical records. And so that was why I worked out so well. And that was all I was going to say, except thank you. And I wanted to just encourage you to learn all you can and make sure that you take advantages of learning all different kinds of things. And don't be afraid if the path changes as you move forward in your career. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Monna. I think all our guests today talk about being flexible and not being afraid to move out of their comfort zone. I did have a few challenges for the students who are in here if you want to learn more about IT. The first one for our younger students and even high school, middle and high school, is to interview a family member like your parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles, about how technology has changed over their lifetime. And technology has really changed. Some of those computers that Kathy was showing us, you have that kind of power in your phone today. So it took up a whole room of computers back then. And for our older students, interview a family member or someone in their community about how their business or organization uses technology. And I think you'll find a lot of really helpful information there. I'd also like to tell you that we have some information on the web for you. We have a Facebook page and a website. We have a resource page on the website with links to organizations where you can try out various things in computers, whether it's some of the Scout cyber programs or computer camps or online learning of computer classes. And if you have a question for us, you can email us at thequeensofcode@gmail.com, and that link is also on our website. I guess the next thing is, special thanks to everybody for having us, and we'll open for questions if there are any questions.
How did you deal with the undeniable discrimination that you faced as a woman in a man's world in the 60s? I know that it must have been very interesting expecting to bring everyone coffee and then saying, no, I actually wrote this equation out and this is how you do this properly. Thank you.
Nancy has a couple of great stories about. Nancy, tell the one about the when you were going where the guy wouldn't look you in the face.
Yes, I was going to put those. I actually have a whole talk on this subject, but one thing that happened while I was still an undergraduate before my junior year, I went to Texas, Austin, Texas, because my roommate was from there. But we thought we had to do something useful, so we decided to take a couple of courses at the University of Texas. So we went over, I registered, and they said, okay, you have to have your registration card signed by someone from the department, because I was a physics major. I wasn't taking physics courses, but that's all right. So I went over, found him, and he looked at the card, he looked at me, he looked at the card, and he said, I think these are exact words, even though it was 50 years ago. He said, well, I normally wouldn't sign this for a girl, but since you're only going to be here for the summer, I'll do it. So I thought, well, this is going to be a kind of rocky road, maybe.
Often we were the only women, when we go to meetings, we'd be the only women in the group. We were fortunate. Not saying that we didn't have some issues, and we certainly did. And there was a lawsuit that was done at our agency in the mid 70s that kind of brought it all to head. But I think for the most part, the guys that we worked with really accepted us, and we were part of a team, and we worked together. And a lot of us had much better experiences at NSA than women did at other places. So we just did an article for the IEEE. Actually, it's posted on the website that talks about some of our early days and stuff. So you might be interested in reading that. But I think women today, certainly with the Me Too movement, are a lot more vocal about issues and being discriminated against.
Thank you. That was a great question, Kimberly.
I have a question for Dr. Welker. What was your favorite part of working in the fields of physics?
I went everywhere from crawling on the floor with a wrench in my hand fixing vacuum systems up to running a fairly quite a large organization with our research and technology. And I liked them all. I really thought when I started that I would be very happy to stay in the lab for my entire career, and I was terrified to have to manage people. But when I got to do it, I thought, this is okay. I think, I'm not too bad at getting along with people, and I liked it. And the number of people I managed grew as I went along. So it's very hard for me to say what was the best, because it was all good, really.
Will the discussions of challenges the panelists faced as women in science be hosted on the site? So I think, are you asking, will this be rebroadcasted? And if that is the question, yes, it will be. Nepris will provide a video that we will be able to post. So all of these questions and answers will be available for that. So if you have questions, other questions, please provide them.
I was going to add that one of the things I liked best about working in the computer field was there was always something new happening. And I loved it when my bosses would come to me and they say, Eileen, we've got a problem. And you go figure it out how to do it, whether it was setting up a first email that went across all our systems, or a Kurzweil machine, and I had to figure out how to connect it so a blind person, one of our blind analysts, could use it to have her computer talk to her. Just, almost every week or quite often there'd just be new challenges, and I loved researching them and figuring out how to make it happen. So, and I think that's really true today too. I mean, if you go do a search on Google News, on technology news, just to see what's happening every day, you'll see something new. And the same is true in cybersecurity. I actually do that each week on cybersecurity. I go in and search on the news to catch up with all the things that are happening in cybersecurity.
How did your families react when you went against the grain and didn't do the whole hide your intellect and no one's going to want to marry you if you're too smart and all of that? How did you navigate going away from home ec and into science, I guess?
When I was growing up, there were 3 girls in my family. So I had parents who really felt it was very important that we get fully educated. And my 2 sisters, once they got married and started a family, stayed at home, for many years. And I chose to go on and continue with a career. I just found that you could find the resources that you needed to help you, with managing a career. And I didn't really find a lot of discrimination about staying at home. I felt like there was a place for everybody. And if you just weren't too thin-skinned about comments that might have been made here and there, it was relatively easy. And also, I was married and I was helping my husband. He was in the Navy, and the income that I provided to our family was certainly enjoyed by everybody in my family. So I think the idea that you can contribute as well as pursue your dreams is very important. And I think that it works out. And it comes down to all being an individual situation between you and the people that you really care about. What other people say or do, or comments they might make, really don't register, or they didn't register with me, even though we were coming up in a time when most women, once they became pregnant or had children, would leave the workforce.
A lot of women, like I had a mother that was very ahead of her time. She and my father ran a small store, and my mother was into women's liberation even when she was growing up. But she encouraged like all the women who worked for her in the store to go to college. She brought in copies of Ms. Magazine for them to read in the 60s. So she was kind of, I was very lucky to have her encourage me as I was growing up. And I think that it's really good. There's only it's less than 20%, I think around 18% of women who are getting computer science degrees now. Back when we first started in programming, it was closer to 30%. So something has gone really in the wrong direction. And one of the reasons we are speaking out and hoping to share our stories is we want to get girls thinking about these careers. Not only are they fun and exciting, but they're well-paying, and you'll learn something every day. And we really need a female perspective. This is the technology that's going to affect our future. We need more women in this field. So we're urging girls to, especially girls, and also the boys too, to think about careers in STEM areas. So.
My family was very encouraging too. My mother actually had a 3-year degree, and my dad, when he got out of service, we actually lived in Tulsa for a while he got his bachelor's, and they were always encouraging me to do whatever I wanted to do. As you know, from what I said, my path was a little bit different, and I want to encourage people to go into technology and science, but I'm going to say don't restrict yourself, sorry, Eileen, to just IT.
Well, I've done other things
I've found there's so much out there that, try these things, find what you like. And like Eileen was telling you, talk to people, not only talk to your parents, but talk to some of their friends, or if you can do any internships with anybody in different careers, find out what they're like, because technology is affecting so many things now, and it's going to change rapidly too as we go forward. So you also have to be aware that what you start in may change radically during the period you're working at it. But at NSA, I actually had a lot of encouragement from some of my male bosses. So that surprised me, but I was very happy with that. So that's it.
Thank you. I think that's true. And I think a lot of us have had other things that we've done too. I also wrote 40 books along the way too.
What were some of your books about?
I had a series of computer books. I had a series called Micro Adventures, and they were books that taught kids in the 80s how to program basically in BASIC. And they were written in second person, and they were written by a group of women. We put it so if the girls were reading the books that they could see themselves in the stories, and it wasn't, and if a boy was reading, he could see himself in there, so that we were really careful of all the pronouns and everything. I also wrote a series for girls called Charisma Inc., it was like Nancy Drew, who had the adventures that we wanted her to have back when we were growing up, and now she got to have the full full adventures. And I wrote a bunch of romantic suspense novels as Rebecca York and several other pseudonyms. So, and I did a lot of collaboration with other women. So that was really fun. And then I got to teach online for 17 years too. So I feel really blessed to have had many opportunities to do a lot of different things, but technology kind of ran through everything in some way or another.
Thank you, each of you, for joining us today. Thank you, students, for all of your questions. We want to thank you for participating in our Queen of Codes cybersecurity chat for today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope that you'll join us again tomorrow for another cybersecurity chat as well. Thanks so much, ladies. Thanks, students.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.